Silence. It makes people uncomfortable, doesn't it? They don't know what to do with it. They shift in their seats, clear their throats, force a little laugh just to fill the space. Because people, they hate silence. They think if no one is talking, something must be wrong. Maybe that's the point. Maybe silence isn't empty. Maybe it's louder than words. People think silence is surrender. They think if you don't speak, if you don't argue, if you don't fight, then you've lost. That's cute. That's what they tell themselves to feel in control, to feel big. But here's the real joke. Silence? Silence isn't weakness. Silence is the one thing they can't handle. They need your reaction. They feed on it. And when you don't give it to them, that's when they start to unravel. See, people have this little game they play. They push, they prod, they poke, just to see what happens. They want a response, need it, because it tells them they matter. It tells them they're important enough to get a rise out of you, but what happens when you don't play? What happens when they throw their little jabs, spit their little insults, and you just don't respond? They panic. They start second guessing. They start wondering, did I go too far? Am I in control here, or are they? That's where the power is, not in the words, not in the shouting, in the quiet, in the absence of reaction. People don't understand that silence is a response. In fact, it's the most powerful response of all. It's the difference between playing their game and making them play yours. You see, when you stay silent, you don't lose control. You take it. You make them uncomfortable. You make them think. And that is more powerful than any insult, any comeback, any speech. You ever watch how people behave when someone refuses to engage? Watch their hands. They fidget. They drum their fingers. They check their phone. They look everywhere but at the person who's just sitting there, quiet. They start talking more, start repeating themselves, start explaining, like they have to justify their own words. Because silence makes them uneasy. It makes them doubt themselves. It makes them fear that maybe, just maybe, they've already lost. But no, most people don't get that. They think power is about being loud. They think the one who talks the most, shouts the loudest, wins the argument. But let's think about that for a second. If someone's really in control, really powerful, why would they need to prove it? Why would they need to argue, to explain, to make sure everyone knows they're right? Maybe, just maybe, the one who doesn't need to speak is the one who actually holds all the cards. That's what silence does. It shifts the power. It puts the weight on them. Suddenly, they're the ones trying to fill the empty space. They're the ones trying to justify, to scramble, to make sense of a situation they thought they controlled. Because people expect noise. They expect anger, defensiveness, explanations. They don't expect nothing. And when you give them nothing, when you just watch, that's when they start to crack. But most people, they can't do it. They can't handle it. They feel like they have to say something. They feel like they have to defend themselves, to fight back, to prove something. That's where they go wrong. Because the second you engage, the second you give them what they want, you are playing their game. And in their game, they always win. The only way to really win is to not play at all. Silence isn't surrender. It isn't weakness. It's control. It's knowing exactly when to speak and when to stay still. It's understanding that sometimes the best move is no move at all. It's letting them talk themselves in circles, letting them trip over their own words, letting them feel their own discomfort, while you sit there untouched, untouchable, because in a world that never stops talking, the one who can sit in silence is the one who holds the real power. People think every battle needs a response. Every insult, every little dig, every provocation, it all needs an answer, right? Someone pushes you, you push back. Someone throws words at you, you throw sharper ones back. That's how it works. That's how you win. At least that's what they want you to believe. Because the moment you respond, the moment you give in, you're not in control anymore. You're reacting. And when you're reacting, you're losing. See, people love control. They love the illusion of it. They poke and prod because they need to know they can move you, shake you, make you break character. And most people, they fall right into the trap. They let their emotions do the thinking. They fire back without stopping to ask, wait a second, who's really in control here? Because if someone can pull a string and make you move, who's the puppet? That's the trick, the grand illusion, making you think you have to respond. But what if you didn't? What if you just didn't play along? What if instead of jumping in, you just stood there? Watch them. Let them talk. Let them squirm. Because that's the thing about people who throw the first punch, whether it's with words or fists. They expect a fight. They want a fight. But if you don't give it to them, well, what are they left with? They're left looking foolish, standing there, swinging at the air, while you're untouchable. Because not every battle is meant to be fought. Not every word needs an answer. Some things are beneath you. And that's what they don't want you to realize. The moment you see the game for what it is, the moment you understand that their words only have power if you give them power, well, the game's over and you win. But most people can't handle not responding. They need to prove something. They need to be heard. They think silence makes them look weak, like they're backing down. But really, silence is strategy. Silence is standing there while the other person digs their own grave, while they trip over their own ego, while they reveal themselves. Because if you just let people talk long enough, they always do. They always show you who they really are. And all you have to do is sit back and watch. That's the beauty of choosing when to engage. It's about choosing, not acting on impulse, not falling for their little traps. It's about recognizing when a battle isn't even worth stepping into. Some people want a reaction more than they want a resolution. They're not looking for a conversation. They're looking for control. And the second you respond, you give it to them. You put the power in their hands. But when you hold back, when you let their words just hang in the air, unanswered, that's when the tables turn. That's when they start feeling the weight of their own words. That's when they start wondering if maybe, just maybe, they've already lost. Because nothing makes a person question themselves like silence. Nothing makes them more uneasy than a lack of reaction. People always assume the one who speaks last wins. They think the one who speaks last wins. They think but really the one who doesn't need to say anything is the one in control. They're the one who's already won. Because power isn't about proving something. It's about knowing when you don't have to. It's about knowing that some battles aren't worth stepping into, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. People love noise. They love the sound of their own voice, the feeling of filling up a room with words, as if talking louder makes them more important, more powerful, more in control. But here's the real joke. Power isn't in the words. It's in who decides when to speak and when to stay silent. And that, my friend, is where the real game begins. See, people don't like silence. It makes them uncomfortable. It forces them to sit with their own thoughts, to face the weight of their own words. And that's terrifying, isn't it? Because words are cheap. Anyone can say anything, spin stories, throw insults, make promises they'll never keep. But silence demands something from them. It leaves space for their own mind to start twisting, turning, second-guessing. And that's real power. Most people, they speak because they're afraid. Afraid of being ignored, afraid of being forgotten, afraid of what might happen if they just stopped. They think silence is weakness, a retreat, a sign they have nothing to say. But here's the fun part. Silence isn't weakness, it's a weapon, a loaded gun that doesn't need to be fired to make people nervous. Because when you choose to stay quiet, when you refuse to give them what they want, suddenly the power shifts. Suddenly, they're the ones scrambling. They're the ones trying to fill the void you left behind. You ever watch a man try to explain himself when no one's arguing back? It's delicious. He starts fumbling, starts repeating himself, starts making the kind of mistakes he wouldn't have made if you had just interrupted him. That's the beauty of silence. It makes them show their hand. It forces them to keep talking, keep revealing, keep exposing themselves. And all the while, you just stand there, watching, waiting, letting them unravel. People need a reaction. They live for it. Without it, they start to question themselves. They start wondering if they went too far, if they said the wrong thing, if maybe, just maybe, they've already lost. And that's when you see the cracks form. That's when the doubt creeps in. That's when the people who thought they were so powerful, so in control, start to fall apart. All because you refuse to play their little game. You ever notice how the most dangerous people aren't the ones who talk the most? No, the dangerous ones are the ones who sit back, who watch, who listen. The ones who know that words are just noise, and real power isn't in the talking. It's in the timing, knowing when to strike, knowing when to let them dig their own grave, knowing that sometimes the best move is no move at all. But that's the trick, isn't it? Most people can't handle that. They need to fill the silence, need to defend themselves, need to make sure their voice is heard. But what they don't realize is the more they speak, the more they lose. Every word they throw out there is just another chance to slip, another chance to contradict themselves, another chance to show you exactly where to hit them. And you don't have to do anything. You just sit back, let them wear themselves out, let them talk themselves into a corner. And then, if you feel like it, if you really want to, you deliver just one sentence. One perfectly timed sentence. And watch everything come crashing down. People love to act like they have all the answers, like they know how the world works, like they know how to control the people around them. But the second they realize they can't control you, that's when the fear kicks in. That's when the panic starts. That's when they realize that all that talking, all that yelling, all that noise, it was never about strength. It was just a distraction, a desperate attempt to cover up the truth. And the truth is, The ones who truly hold the power don't need to say a thing. People have this funny little idea that if they can just explain themselves enough, if they can find the right words, the perfect argument, then everything will make sense. People will understand them. People will agree. People will finally see things their way. What a joke. Words don't change minds. People don't listen to hear the truth. Oh, but they love to talk. They'll go on and on, spinning their stories, justifying their actions, trying so desperately to make you see them. But here's the thing. They don't want you to see them, not really. They just want to be right. They want to be heard. They want to be validated. And that's where the game begins. Because the moment you refuse to give them that, oh, that's when the mask starts slipping. See, people don't handle silence well. It's like an itch they can't scratch. A weight pressing down on them, making them question everything. They'll repeat themselves, rephrase, get louder, as if somehow forcing you to react will make them feel safe again. But it won't. Because the moment you decide not to play along, the moment you let them squirm in their own words, they realize something terrifying. You don't need to explain yourself to them. And that shakes them to their core. It's a funny thing, watching someone crumble under the weight of their own words. You see it in their eyes first. This little flicker of doubt, a hesitation, a crack in their confidence. They thought they had control. They thought they were leading the conversation. But suddenly, they're not so sure. Suddenly, they're the ones scrambling, trying to figure out where they lost their grip. And that's when it happens. That's when the fear sets in, because deep down, people are afraid of one thing more than anything else: being wrong. And not just wrong in the little ways. No, wrong in the big ways. Wrong about who they are. Wrong about what they believe. Wrong about the story they've been telling themselves their entire lives. And silence makes them face that. You ever notice how people will argue themselves into circles? You don't even have to say a word. Just sit there. Watch. Let them unravel. Because the truth is, most people don't believe what they're saying. Not really. They want to believe it. They need to believe it. But the second they feel resistance, real resistance, not shouting, not debating, just absence, well, that's when they start fighting themselves. That's when they start filling in the blanks, digging their own graves, proving your point without you ever saying a word. Oh, but they'll try to drag you into it. They'll bait you, provoke you, do anything to get a reaction, because if you react, they win. If you react, they get to keep playing the game. But when you don't, when you just sit there, watching, unshaken, that's when the panic starts to creep in. That's when they start realizing that maybe, just maybe, they don't have as much control as they thought. And control, my friend, is everything. That's what this whole game is about. People don't want the truth. They want to control the truth. They want to shape it, twist it, make it fit into their little world where they're always the hero, always the victim, always right. But reality doesn't work like that. Reality doesn't care how many words you throw at it. And silence is reality staring them right in the face, daring them to blink first. You see, when you don't react, when you don't fight, when you don't feed their need for validation, something incredible happens. They start to see themselves for what they really are. And most people, oh, they hate that. Because deep down, they know. They know they're not as strong as they pretend to be. They know their words are just smoke, covering up all the little cracks they hope no one else will notice. And when you don't give them an excuse, when you don't give them an out, they have no choice but to sit in that truth. And that's the real kicker, isn't it? The strongest thing you can do is nothing at all. Because words are cheap, but silence is expensive. And when you make someone pay for their own delusions, when you let them drown in their own noise, you don't just win the argument. You make them realize that they were never really in control to begin with. People like to think they have power, that they're in control. They walk around with their heads high, chests puffed out, spitting out words like they mean something. They convince themselves that if they talk enough, if they make enough noise, then the world will bend to their will. But what happens when all that noise disappears? What happens when the room goes quiet, when the crowd stops listening, when their words just hang there? That's when the panic sets in. That's when they start to wonder if they ever had control in the first place. Most people don't know what to do with silence. It's unnatural to them. It makes them nervous, jittery, like they're standing on the edge of a cliff and someone just told them to take a step forward. Because when there's no sound, no distractions, no noise to drown out the thoughts they'd rather not think about, well, that's when the real show starts. That's when people start unraveling. That's when they start exposing themselves without even realizing it. You see it all the time. Someone gets called out, put on the spot, and instead of owning it, instead of sitting in that uncomfortable silence, they scramble. They defend, they explain, they twist their words into knots, all in a desperate attempt to make the silence go away. Because silence means one thing. Means there's nowhere to run. No excuses, no justifications, no clever little tricks to change the subject. Just them standing there face to face with reality. And reality? That's not a place most people like to visit. Funny, isn't it? How people will do anything to avoid facing themselves. They'll lie. They'll manipulate. They'll build entire lives around a version of the truth that makes them feel safe. But silence strips all that away. It doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care about your carefully crafted image. It just sits there staring at you, waiting. And that waiting? Oh, that's the part that really drives them crazy. Because the longer the silence stretches, the more they start to hear the one voice they've been trying to drown out this whole time, their own. People think strength is about shouting the loudest, about making sure their voice is the one that dominates the room. But real strength, real power, that comes from knowing when to stop talking, from understanding that sometimes the best move you can make is to say nothing at all. Because when you don't respond, when you don't react, when you let them sit there with their own words hanging in the air like a bad joke, that's when you see who they really are. That's when the mask slips. Most people aren't ready for that kind of power. They need validation, they need reassurance, they need someone to tell them they're right even when they're wrong, and when they don't get it, when they're met with nothing but silence, that's when they start questioning everything. Their arguments, their beliefs, their entire understanding of how the world works, it all starts to crumble, piece by piece. And you don't have to do a thing. Just watch. Let them fall apart on their own. The best part? They'll never admit it. They'll never say, "Hey, you got me." That silence, that made me think. No. They'll pretend it didn't affect them. They'll act like it was nothing. But inside, inside they're replaying every moment, every second of that silence over and over again, wondering why it felt so loud. Because that's the trick, isn't it? Silence isn't empty. It's full of everything they've been trying to ignore. And here's the real kicker. When you master silence, when you learn how to hold it, to wield it like a weapon, you start seeing things differently. You start realizing just how much people reveal when they're trying not to. Every nervous glance, every fidget, every forced laugh, it all tells you something. It tells you who they are, what they fear, what they're running from. And once you see that, once you understand how much people need noise to feel safe, you'll never see the world the same way again. Because the truth is, people don't fear silence. They fear what it means. They fear what it exposes. They fear that without all the noise, without all the distractions, they might have to face the one thing they've been running from their entire lives, themselves. People like to believe that if they say the right thing at the right time in just the right way, everything will fall into place. They think words have some kind of magic, some kind of power that can shape the world around them. But here's the fun part. Words don't mean anything when they're coming from the wrong place. People talk and talk and talk, but half the time they don't even believe what they're saying. They just say what they think they're supposed to say, what they hope will make them look good, what will keep them in control. But control? Oh, that's the biggest joke of all. See, people are afraid of silence. They're afraid of what happens when they don't get the last word, when they don't get to explain themselves, when they don't get to bend the story to fit the version of reality they've built in their heads. They panic. They get desperate. And when someone's desperate, well, that's when you really start to see what they're made of. They'll start throwing words like punches, hoping that one of them lands, hoping that if they say enough, they'll drown out whatever it is they don't want to hear. But the truth, the truth doesn't go away just because someone's talking over it. You ever notice how the people who talk the most usually have the least to say? They fill the air with noise, hoping no one notices that there's nothing underneath. But if you sit back, if you just watch, you start to see the cracks. You start to see the moments where the mask slips, where the real person underneath peeks through. And those moments, those are the ones that matter. That's when you see who someone really is. Most people don't have the patience for that. They think silence is weakness, that not responding means losing. But real power isn't about having the last word. It's about knowing when you don't need to say anything at all. It's about being comfortable in that space where other people get. It's about knowing that the moment you stop playing their game, they lose control of it. And people, they hate that. They hate not being in control. You ever sit in a room with someone who needs to be right? Someone who just can't stand the idea of not having the final say? Try this sometime. Just let them talk. Let them trip over their own words. Let them build their little tower of logic, brick by shaky brick. And then, say nothing. Watch what happens. Watch how they squirm. Watch how they need you to engage, how they start searching for any little crack in your silence, because deep down, they don't actually want to convince you. They want to convince themselves. And when you don't give them that validation, when you don't give them the reaction they were hoping for, they start to unravel. People think silence is passive, that it's something weak people do when they don't know what else to say. But the right kind of silence, that's not passive at all. That's calculated. That's deliberate. That's the kind of silence that gets inside people's heads, that makes them start questioning things they didn't want to question. And once someone starts questioning themselves, well, the game's already over. The funniest thing about it all The people who fear silence the most are usually the ones hiding the most. They use words like a shield, like a mask, like a wall they can hide behind. But silence kicks that wall right down. Silence makes them face things they'd rather not face. It makes them realize that no matter how much they talk, no matter how much they explain, they can't change what is. And for some people, that's the scariest thing in the world. People are always looking for an answer, for some kind of sign that they're on the right path, that they're doing the right thing. But not every answer comes wrapped in a nice little speech. Sometimes the answer is in the waiting, in the not saying, in the not reacting. Sometimes the answer is letting the silence do all the talking. And if you know how to listen, if you really know how to listen, oh, you'd be amazed at what silence can tell you.